Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of our RPG 2D tutorials. Today we're going to learn how to create animation for our character, how to link them together, and then connect them to a C# script. Let's get started. Before doing anything, we have to learn about something called Animator Controllers. Animator Controllers is basically a container that will include animation states and all the interactions between them. To start, let's create our first animator. Let's make a folder called Animations. Inside the animations, let's make something called Player. Inside the player, we're going to go ahead and click Create Animator Controller. Let's call it Player Animator. This is going to be our animator controller for the player. In order to start working on it and see what's inside, we need to first of all just put it inside a player object. So let's drag and drop it into our player, and I actually want to change our player's name to player. That's it. It's much nicer. As soon as you do this, you will see a new component called animator dragged in here with the controller called player animator. This is exactly what we need. And you can either double click it, or you can go ahead, click window, animation, and then animator, and then you will have this pop up, which I recommend that you anchor it somewhere, and you will have access for the animator controller. Uh, by default, you'll have this view, probably just drag and drop it, just put it somewhere so we have it both at the same place. So this is more of a new field for you maybe, or not much for others, but I'm not gonna go ahead and explain everything in details. I'm gonna explain stuff that we actually come across too. So we have three stuff in here. Each animation is going to be encapsulated in something called state. And state is a way or a mechanic that's going to play those animations. And each state will have an entry and exit point. An entry is basically from where it's going to play and how. And the exit is going to be the opposite, to where and how. While any state is basically going to play after any state exits. We don't have to worry about this right now. All we have to worry about the look and how to create animation. So now we have an animator in a player. We need to create our first animation. Let's go back to the folder here. Right click, click create and animation. We need to create the first animation, which is going to be idle. And then we're going to have another one called walking. Those two will basically illustrate how to create animations. If you have more animations, you can put as much as you want, depending on what you learn today. Since we have this animation created, you're going to see that on the right side, you have these settings. And you have to think about it. If you have an animation that's going to play once, keep it as it is. But if you want to make it looping and play repetitively, make sure to tick the loop time here. So since our idle animation is going to keep playing over and over again, we want to make sure that it actually has a loop time. That done, we need to drag and drop it inside our animator and able to make it work. So let's drag and drop it inside this window anywhere. And as soon as you drop it, you will see that another pop-up comes up and it's linked to entry. So by default, every animator has to have a default animation state. Since this is our first, it's going to be our default. And you can see if you click on this line here, you'll see default entry transition. So this will play by default. And then you will see here that every state has an animation called motion and a speed. Let's leave that as it is. Let's create our first animation. And to do this, you have to have an animation window by going to Window, Animation, and then Animation. I already have it set up on the bottom side, and it's better to have it set up horizontally because it's going to go as a time frame in the horizontal axis. You'll see that whenever you open it, it says no animation object is selected. You have to click on your player that has the animator, and it will show here. If you have another player or another object that has another animator, it will open that one. Before diving in here, we need to get the assets. By assets, I mean the actual images that are going to work as the animation. We have all these stuff in our atlas. So let's go back to the atlas, click Sprite Editor, And let's zoom into our player. Since this is the one that we chose, we've got this one as the default animation. If you look closely, we have multiple animations in here, and then each one or each multiple ones have their own, I would say, functionality. Let's look at this one. The first one and the second one, if you look at them closely, you see that those two are idle animation because the player seems to actually just, like squat slowly. This is the one here. While the third one and the fourth one are moving. It does look funny, but it actually is the moving. So it's 2 frames for the moving. Like you see his legs are opening apart. It does look like jumping, but it is actually the moving. While this, and this are the jumping animation for a side jumping, while the last one is stationary when you jump standing still. In this episode, we're going to apply the idle and the moving. So since we have this one set up, let's just rename it into player idle 0. It's good to name them and then number them because you want to make sure that which one is the first and the second and the third frame. And one of the important stuff while dealing with animation frames is you want to make sure that they have the same size. It doesn't mean exact same size, but they have to have, if it's a stationary animation, it has to have the same scale exactly. By that, I mean same width and height. While transitioning animations can have different size depending on the direction of animation, which you don't have to worry about right now. So looking at it, we have this one with a width of 15 and a height of 20. And this one is going to be the same. Let's name it player idle 1. As soon as we do this, let's go apply, close it, and then you'll see it in here. We got player idle 0, player idle 1. And you can see if you rotate, if you change between them, they actually play the animation. Let's go ahead and click on player, open the animation window, and then we're going to have to focus on the right side, which is going to be the timeline, while the left side is actually the control panel. Before we drag and drop our frames, we want to make sure that we select the idle. Right now we only have idle, but if you have other ones, you have to make sure that you select the animation state that you want to edit. It's empty right now, so what we need to do is we need to drag and drop both animations. You can drag and drop them one by one, or just click shift and drag and drop it. As soon as you do this, you'll see these small dots in here. Those are keyframes, and keyframes are basically points in the animation timeline that actually modifies something with the object. It can be transfer position, it can be a rotation, it can be a sprite like what we have right now, it can be anything else. So let's click on the scene, zoom in here, and then we want to see how it plays, right? We can do it by clicking the play button. So let's click play, and you'll see the animation actually plays, but it's way too fast. That's because the frames are so close and they have basically 1 millisecond. So we want to make sure that actually looks nice. So let's increase it into half a second. Let's go 30 milliseconds and let's play it. So it does look slightly better, but it doesn't actually look good because we're playing the first animation here and then the second animation is getting played 1 millisecond. I do recommend opening this here to see like a small illustrations of what's changing here. And how to fix this is we need to play the second animation at the same time as the first animation. So one way to do this is to copy and paste this frame or drag and drop that frame to wherever you want to put it. So since we can do it easily by clicking on this one, Control C, and we're playing half a second, the first animation, let's make sure to have another half a second, which is going to be 1, and click Control V. So we have an animation length of 1 second. Let's see how it looks. Yep, as you see, it looks way much nicer. You can increase the speed, decrease the speed, however you want. And easy way to do this is you can either drag and drop everything or click Control A and have this scaled up or down. Again, if you want to see more, just scroll backwards or inwards. If you want to see everything, just click F and it will maximize the size to the full length of the animation. Let's go back to the animator. We see we have this thing here set up. If you click play, you will see that the animation will keep on playing indefinitely, even if you move. So that's why we're going to integrate the moving. So I want to have a challenge for you. Can you create the animation moving and get back to the video, and let's see if you do it the same way. Go. All right, so to create the animation, let's go and do it the same way. Click create animation. Let's name it moving. And then click the animator and drag and drop it here. You see when you do it, oh, I think I dropped the wrong one. Drag and drop it here, the moving, yep. See that it does create another one, but there's no lines connected to it because we already have a default animation. And I forgot to actually take the loop time because walking is going to be also loopy. As long as we're walking, we're going to keep playing the same animation. Let's go ahead and click on the player, open the animation window, and then select the moving. To make the moving, we have to also import the moving animations. I would say frames. We have these two. Let's do it the same way. Let's have player like this. Make sure that we have 15 by 20. That's good. And let's name it player move 0. Let's have this one. See, if I put it in the wrong size, I can just go here, click 15, tap 20, and adjust the size to match the player. Player move 1. That's amazing. Let's go back, click on a player, make sure the moving is selected, and then we can drag and drop the move 0 here, and the move 1, we can put it right directly on point 3. And before testing it, I know that it's going to look a bit weird because the last frame is not going to play much. So let's just drag and drop move 1 again and put it here, or you can just copy and paste it. Since the moving animation is going to be slightly faster because we're not standing still, it's going to be more of a left, right. I'm going to click Control A and decrease it to have it, let's say, half a second as a total. It will look something like this, which is fine for my speed of character, but if you have a different speed, make sure to adjust it to however you want. So we have set up the animation state itself. We need to make sure that we need to transit from idle to moving and from moving to idle. And one way to do this is have parameters. And parameters are basically like variables, but in the animator. And we need to change that variables according to our player script. So before we start creating parameters, let's make sure and click make transition from and to the idle. You can do this by right-clicking on idle, make transition, drag and drop it here. And the same way from moving back to idle. And you can see that if you click on this line, you'll see that you'll have something called exit settings and the actual timeline with a preview in the bottom and something called conditions. We're going to use the conditions to determine how or when to move from idle to moving and backwards from this one. You will have two tabs in the top here called layers and parameters. Make sure to open the parameters and you will see we have no parameters in here. Let's add something of type boolean and call it is walking. By default, it's going to be false. But we want to make sure that when we move from idle to moving, we want this to be, let's click plus, and it will add the first parameter, is walking. We want to make sure that it's true. So if it's true, we move to moving. That's a lot of moving. We transit to moving, while the other one, we need to make sure that it is false. You might have noticed that whenever we play the preview animation, the moving animation plays really funny. That's because there's something called exit time, and exit time is used in more actually 3D stuff that before you start the animation, you want to transit slowly from standing still to walking. But since our animation is going to be pixelized and it actually doesn't matter for exits, we want to make sure that we open this setting here and put the exit time as 0 and the transition duration as 0. And this way, when we change from idle to moving, the moving will play right away without any exit time. And do the same thing for the other one. So that's been said. We've set up the animator to have parameters and the transitioning. All we have to do right now is communicate to the animator from the script. And if you guessed it, yes, we will check the moving value. So let's click on our player, open our player script, and let's see the value that we want to change. Before we actually determine what value that we want to have, we need to create a reference to the animator. And we go up here to the fields or private variables and click private animator, and let's name it animator. Then at the start, the same thing as the box collider, we need to assign it by getting it from the current component. And let's click component animator, and that's it. Again, you have to make sure that you have an animator set up in your game object. If you look closely at our movement script, we have something that actually changes all the time, which is determining the movement, and it's move delta. So move delta actually determines if we want to move or not. And it's basically an x and y value. It's a vector 2. And in math, vector 2 is basically an x and y lines. And we want to say, like, we want to send the data back to the animator, and it will identify that if we're moving or not. How to determine this is by simply, you can simply say if we have if the length of the x or y is bigger than 0, just send it. But there's a better way. So in determining the x and y, there's a better thing called magnitude. And magnitude is basically the link between the x and y, and you will have a perpendicular line called magnitude, and it's going to be determined from 0 to 1. You can access this one by going ahead, click move delta, the magnitude. So we'll use this one way much better than actually checking the y and x. So what we do is we click the boolean, let's name it is walking, and we have to make sure that the magnitude is bigger than 1. So move delta, the magnitude is bigger than 0. Sorry, I said 1, I meant 0. So we have this value. So this value will always trigger as long as we're moving. Even if we hit the walls, if we hit a wall, if we not move, we're gonna stand still. You will see that in the example. And to speak with the animator, we already have the animator object in here. We go ahead and see animator, and we have to call something set or get. So we have to you can have a lot of sets. We can, if your parameter is a float, you can set float, but ours is a boolean. So we go ahead and click set boolean, and when you open it, you're gonna see you have two variations. We're gonna use the second one, and the second one will give you two options. The first thing is we have to tell it which parameter you need to change and which value to get it. To just double check, if you go back in here, our parameter, we named it is walking. So you want to make sure that you get the same name as the parameter. So make sure to Control C, I can just copy it and paste it in here, is walking, and we need to pass this value here. That is all you have to do in here. So what this does, if we're moving, we're going to pass true. If we're stuck or standing still, it's going to pass false. Let's go ahead and see what happens here. So let's go click play. I'm going to increase this to maximize. So since we're not moving, he's just standing still. As soon as we move, you're going to notice that he's going to change the animation. Here we go. You see, he's actually moving his feet, like cluck, 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 cluck. So that's how it happens. Like even if we hit the wall and stand still, he's not going to play the moving animation. Same thing going up, same thing going to enemy here. So we have created an animation. So in this lesson, we've learned how to create animation by using Animator controllers and also making states, conditionals between each animation, and connecting it to the C# script. You can add more animations if you want. I hope you liked this lesson, and if you did, hit the like and subscribe. Also hit the bell, get the latest updates. And I think that's it for me, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.